Story number one. This happened a few months ago on one of my first solo runs at the crematory. I'd been working there for a few weeks, mostly shadowing other attendants, learning how to tag, weigh, and prep the bodies for cremation. That night, my supervisor told me to do a small after-hours drop-off by myself. 2 bodies, both elderly, both to be logged and held overnight. Nothing unusual. It was around 10 at night when I pulled into the lot. The parking lot was empty, the air colder than usual for late spring. The fluorescent crematory sign was buzzing, lighting up the cracked lot in flickering blue. The place looked completely dead. No lights on except the security bulbs outside that cast this pale orange hue over the entrance. The crematory always had that smell, a mix of disinfectant, ashes, and something metallic that you could taste on the back of your tongue. Being alone in a place built just for the dead puts a certain feeling in your spine, even if you don't think about it too hard. I parked the van and went in. The inside was dark too. I let myself in with the code, flipped on the panel, and turned off the alarm. It beeped and went still, a sound I'd heard 100 times, but that night it felt loud enough to make my ears ring. I went out, wheeled both gurneys inside. Every industrial light glared above stainless countertops. It was all clinical, humming, but there was just enough shadow to make you not want to stand with your back to anything. The ovens, retorts as we call them, were all off. When I was weighing the second body, I heard it. A deep, dull thump. It came from inside one of the retorts. At first, I thought I'd imagined it. Sound bounces weirdly in there, and the metal walls sometimes settle. But then it came again. This time, 2 quick bangs, muffled but heavy, like something striking from the inside. I froze. My hands were still on the scale, and I could feel my heartbeat pushing against my fingertips. The ovens were all off. The main one hadn't been used that day. Still, the noise sounded like someone or something was inside. I waited about 10 seconds. Nothing. The room was silent again, except for the hum of the fluorescence. I tried to shake it off. Maybe some metal expanded or the chamber door wasn't sealed properly. I went back to labeling the boxes. Then the alarm switch, the one I had flipped off when I entered, started ringing. Loud, shrill, the kind that makes your stomach drop. That alarm only goes off when the main door opens or someone walks through the motion sensor. The door was still closed. I could see it. I just stood there for a second, waiting for logic to catch up. Maybe a mouse triggered the motion sensor. Maybe the system was glitching. I started walking toward the panel to silence it, when the retort suddenly roared to life. The fire inside blasted bright orange through the viewing glass, the whole machine trembling as if it was being forced on. The control screen flickered erratically, numbers flashing nonsense. For a second, I saw something through the little round glass window, something I can't forget. It looked like a face pressed against the inside of the retort door. The flesh was dripping, melting like candle wax, the skin sagging and bubbling from the heat, but it moved. The eyes rolled upward, and I swear it was grinning. I backed up so fast I nearly tripped over one of the gurneys. My body felt locked in place. I couldn't tell if what I saw was real or just light and panic messing with me. Then, as suddenly as it started, the oven went quiet again. The flame died. The panel went dark. I didn't stay. I bolted out and called my supervisor, told him something was wrong with the retort. He sounded irritated but came anyway. When we went back in together, everything was normal. The alarm system was steady, no lights flashing, the ovens all off, and the room looked like it always did. Sterile, empty, silent. He checked the controls, looked at me like I was overreacting, and left me to finish up. I didn't want to stay, but I also didn't want to look paranoid. So I just stood there for a bit, trying to convince myself that I'd imagined it all. Maybe the fire system reset itself. Maybe the glass reflection looked like a face. Then it happened again. The retort, the same one, kicked on with a hiss. The ignition flames whooshed. The chamber glowed red from the inside. But this time the control panel didn't light up. It was dead. No readings, no lights. The fire was just there. And again, through the glass, I saw that same face. Only clearer this time, like it had been waiting. The grin was wider, and the eye sockets were hollow, dark pits leaking molten flesh. It tilted, almost playfully, before the flames flickered out as if someone yanked the power. I stood frozen for what felt like a full minute. The air smelled like burnt hair and something wet. The silence afterward was so thick it made my ears ring. I couldn't bring myself to check the oven. I just grabbed my coat, left everything where it was, and locked up. The next morning I came in early, expecting someone to question the mess I'd left. But everything was fine. The retorts were cool, no burn logs registered from the night before, and no alarms on record. I even checked the security footage. It showed me walking in, doing my job, and standing still for a bit before leaving. The oven never turned on. The lights never flickered. Nothing moved, except for one thing. At the exact moment I remember seeing the face, the camera went static for 3 seconds. When the feed came back, one of the gurneys was facing the wrong direction, turned slightly toward the retort. No one mentioned it. I didn't either. Not loud enough to draw attention, just enough to let me know it's there. A few weeks ago, I noticed something else. One of the temperature sensors on that same retort shows a reading every night between 10:15 and 10:30, even when it hasn't been used all day. It spikes for a few seconds, then drops back to 0. The technicians can't find a fault. They keep saying it's probably a wiring glitch. I still work there. You get used to strange noises and odd smells, but every time I walk past that particular oven, I can't help but glance at the glass. Sometimes when the room is dark and the reflection hits just right, I swear I can see something faint moving behind it, like a shape pressed against the other side, trying to form a grin that never quite fades. I tell myself it's just my eyes playing tricks in the low light. That's what makes sense. That's what keeps me doing my job. But deep down, every time I hear that soft tapping, I can't help but think maybe one of them never really burned right. Story number 2. I've worked as a pathologist's assistant for 12 years, so I've seen my share of oddities. Wrong charts, switched IDs, mislabeled samples. Paperwork mistakes happen all the time. But what happened with the Jane Doe from the fire? I still can't wrap my head around it. The call came in around midnight. Female, mid-30s, found in a burnt-out house near the industrial area. The fire had gutted everything. No ID survived. The body was mostly charred, but intact enough for post-mortem. I logged her in like always. Time, case number, condition. The smell was awful. That burnt, sweet scent of cooked flesh mixed with smoke. The kind that clings to your gloves even after you double wash your hands. I gave her a temporary toe tag, handwritten, sealed in plastic, and stapled a matching chart. Logged it all, double-checked. Nothing out of the ordinary. The next morning, my supervisor said the log entry was fine, but the tag and chart were missing. I thought maybe I just misplaced them, though I never do. It bugged me, but fine, I remade both. The new tag, a fresh chart, clipped it to the clipboard hanging beside her gurney. By afternoon, the coroner came down to start the autopsy prep. The body was still there, but again, no tag, no chart. The clipboard hook was empty. The weirdest part wasn't even that. It was the air around her. You could literally feel the cold coming off that one gurney, like a freezer leak, except the rest of the room was at the normal 4 degrees Celsius. I waved my hand over the metal surface. The air bit like open ice. We called maintenance. They checked the vents, the seals, even the compressor lines. Everything was fine. They left shaking their heads. Over the next 2 days, it became a thing. Every shift replaced the tag and chart. Every shift, they vanished. The cold patch stayed. The camera above that corner sometimes flickered when you passed by, like the feed was buffering, but only there. One night, I stayed late. The security lights in the corridor flickered. I opened the fridge where her body lay. Inside, the silver tag I'd attached was missing, but in its place was this curling sliver of black char, fuzzy at the edge, impossible to tell what it used to be. Sleep became spotty after that. People had started avoiding the body. Her skin, what was left, looked different. Glisten of wetness on the burned patches, almost as if it sweated wax. A film of something transparent hovering over her face, catching any light and bending it just so. Whenever I'd walk by, the cold would slide up my back and clutch at my lungs. Things got weirder after that. There would be times when I would walk past her drawer and hear light metallic tapping sounds near her drawer when the room was quiet, condensation forming on the inside of the observation window. and once a faint scorch mark on the tile floor beneath the wheels of her gurney. In the fourth day, the supervisor, the coroner, and I toe-tagged her together. We did it right in front of the overhead camera. I remember the sharp scent of formalin and the hum of the freezers behind us. The tag was clearly visible on the feed, the chart placed right beside her hand. We even recorded audio. Everything was clocked, verified. An hour later, when we checked the footage, the video froze during the minute we attached the tag, then static. The whole middle section just fuzzed out. When it came back, the tag was gone. The clipboard empty again. The coroner replayed it, frame by frame. Every time it tried to focus on her feet, the screen shimmered, like heat distortion. The name field on the tag was just a blur of white. Audio picked up a faint crackling, like burning wood, even though there was no fire anywhere in the lab. That night I stayed late. I wanted to prove it was all tech glitches. I replaced the tag again, wrote in block letters so big you could see them from 10 feet away. I spoke the time and date aloud as I placed it, just for the camera. Then I sat in the control booth, watching the feed. For about 10 minutes, nothing moved. Then the temperature reading on the wall display dropped, from 4 degrees Celsius to 1 degree Celsius. The cold crept in through the vents, frosting the corners of the monitor. I rubbed my hands, thinking maybe the thermostat was acting up. On the screen, I noticed condensation forming inside the cold chamber, a fine mist hovering right above her. The tag started to curl slightly, like something warm was breathing over it. Then the camera blinked. Static. When it came back, the tag was gone. I went in immediately. The mist was gone, but my breath puffed white. I reached under the gurney, around the floor. Nothing. I checked the drain grates, thinking maybe air suction had pulled it down. Empty. That's when I heard it. A faint ticking sound, like nails tapping metal, from inside the cold storage drawer next to hers. The one we kept for unclaimed remains? I told myself it was the compressor. Then I realized the compressor was off. The tapping stopped. Something dripped, slow, heavy drops that left dark, wet circles on the floor. I bent down. The spots smelled faintly of smoke. I clocked out early after that, told the coroner I was coming down with something. The next morning, security called me in. They checked last night's footage. Same story, static during the critical minutes, the tag vanishing mid-frame. But there was something new. In one frame, right before the static hit, there was a faint outline near the gurney, like a person standing too close to the camera light. Not clear, just a shape. You couldn't make out features, but the reflection on the metal tray showed a second shadow that wasn't mine. We moved Jane Doe for tests later that day. The gurney left a faint scorch mark on the floor, like a hot pan briefly touched tile. The tag and chart didn't follow her to the imaging room. They were gone again. By then, the story had spread through the staff. People whispered that maybe she didn't want to be identified. The police report said the house she'd been found in was already abandoned. No residents. No missing person filed, just an unlisted property that went up in flames. 2 days after her autopsy, the entire video server for that week corrupted. Every file from the cold room was unreadable, except for one short clip from the corridor camera. It showed me walking out that night, just before the static incident. Behind me for half a second, there was another figure at the door. Looked like a person, but darker, like a hole in the light. I don't know if it was smoke residue, bad lighting, or my eyes playing tricks, but I haven't stayed past 7 p.m. since. Probably just residue from the fire, or my mind connecting dots that aren't there. Paperwork mistakes happen. Tags get misplaced, but every time I think that, I remember the static on the footage, the way her name blurred out, as if even the system refused to keep it. And I start to wonder if maybe some people really are desperate not to be known. Story number 3. Back in my early 20s, I worked the night cleaning crew at St. Mary's Hospital. Not the fancy part of the hospital either. We were the ones who cleaned the aftermath of death. Wiping down rooms, removing bed sheets, disinfecting surfaces, and sometimes, yes, moving bodies to the morgue. People think it's horrifying, but honestly, it's not that bad after a while. The bodies never bothered me much. They just looked like life-size mannequins that had been through too much. Cold, empty, harmless. I got used to the silence of those rooms. The kind of silence that's thick and heavy, like it's pressing down on you. There was one night though, one single night that I still can't make sense of, no matter how much I try. So this was maybe 6 months into the job. Me and this guy, Ed, we got a notice around 2:30 a.m. that a patient had passed in room 407. An elderly man in his late 60s, heart failure. Can't give real names, but he had that look you get when you rot from the inside, kind of sunken and yellow. We went up with the gurney. The hallways were dim and echoey, that kind of hospital quiet where every sound feels magnified. The distant beep of a monitor, the squeak of a shoe sole, the low hum of the fluorescent lights. We entered the room. The man was there, wrapped in a white sheet up to his neck, a still face that looked like it was made of wax. His eyes were half open, which wasn't unusual. Sometimes the muscles don't fully relax. His pupils were glazed, dull. We followed the usual procedure, unplugged the equipment, wiped down the rails, turned off the monitor. Ed lifted the man gently while I slid the sheet and adjusted the gurney. The body was stiff but movable, the kind of cold stiffness you feel even through gloves. Once we had him secured, I went to stand by the foot of the gurney to steer. That's when Ed made this sharp little squeak. Not even a full sound, just the kind you make when your throat forgets how to scream. He was staring at the man's face. The man was blinking. Not twitching, not spasm blinking. Blinking. Slow, deliberate movements. Both eyelids going down, then up. Over and over. I remember every detail. His pupils didn't move. They were fixed and cloudy. The blinking was mechanical, almost rhythmic. The eyes themselves were wrong, glassy, dry, and yet somehow aware. My first thought was maybe some kind of reflex, nerve discharge, post-mortem reaction. I'd heard muscles can spasm after death, but eyelids don't just blink like that. It wasn't random. It was as if he was trying to look at us, to signal something. Ed started muttering something and backed up so fast he hit the IV stand. I couldn't move. I just stared at the man's face. He was lying perfectly still, no chest movement, no color in the skin. But his eyes kept blinking, steady and calm, like someone slowly waking up. We both panicked and called for the nurses. Within seconds, they came rushing in, thinking it was some kind of miracle. The monitors were reattached, oxygen tubes shoved in place, defib pads ready. One nurse whispered code blue into her walkie. I watched from the corner as they tried to bring him back, but there was nothing to bring back. No pulse, no breath, no reaction to light, no heartbeat. I could see his toenails, grayish, already darkening. The blinking stopped the moment the doctor touched his wrist to check the pulse, like someone had flipped a switch. I swear I saw a tiny tear roll down from the left eye, but it didn't look wet, more like a tiny bit of something greasy sliding down, leaving a faint yellow track. The hands never moved. The mouth hung open just a bit, like frozen mid-snore. But every once in a while, the eyelids would twitch shut super tight, scrunching the skin in a way that almost looked frustrated, or like he was trying hard not to see something. They declared him again, officially, and told us to proceed. That should have been the end of it, but things got strange after that. We wheeled him to the morgue. It's down a long ramp that always smells faintly of metal and disinfectant. The walls there are painted this dull sea green that makes everything feel colder. There's a hum that comes from the refrigeration units, a constant low vibration that you can feel through your shoes. Once we reached the morgue, we signed the logbook and slid the body into one of the steel drawers. I remember thinking his hand looked slightly different than before, a faint reddish tint under the nails, like fresh blood had somehow pooled there. I brushed it off as lighting. Later that night, Ed quit. Didn't last another shift. For the rest of that week, I tried rationalizing it. Maybe the eye muscles do something weird after death. Maybe some chemical process makes tear ducts leak. Maybe I was overtired and my brain filled in the rest. I wanted that to be true. But 3 days later, I got the room for cleaning again. The floral pattern on the bed sheets had a set of greasy yellow streaks where the guy's head rested. The marks stopped perfectly at the pillow's edge, not even a finger off. I washed the pillowcase twice and the faint shape still showed every time the light hit it sideways. A faint twin line, like tracks after a drip. I didn't think much until one day while cleaning the corridor at night, something unusual happened. The cleaning cart rolled a few inches on their own, even on flat ground. I stood there like a statue. That's when I noticed that the motion sensor lights in the hall near the morgue kept flicking on, even when nobody was around. The scariest part came about a week later. I was cleaning another empty room on the same floor. It had the same layout, same type of bed. When I looked in the reflection of the switched-off TV screen, I thought I saw a man lying in the bed behind me. Same white sheet, same half-open eyes. When I turned around, the bed was empty. I left the room without finishing my checklist. I kept thinking about that blank, unblinking stare, and the flicker of eyelids slamming closed again and again, like the man was desperately trying to shut himself in from something only he could see on the other side. The hospital said nothing. The pillow got tossed. I stayed at that job a few months more, carting bodies here and there, but I never saw anything else so alive in the dead. I still wonder if, for a few minutes, that man's eyes just wouldn't let go, clinging to the last thing they'd seen, or maybe still seeing something in that room that wasn't meant for the living. Could be I imagined it all. Maybe Ed did too. Stress makes people weird, but I'll never look at a sleeping person, eyes twitching under the lids, the same way again. And sometimes late, I'll wake up with my own eyes scrunched tight, praying I never see whatever he did. Story number 4. I worked as an assisting nurse in the morgue of a government hospital, mostly quiet, mostly routine. My shifts were predictable. Tag the bodies, note the reports, and make sure the freezers were functioning. The dead were easier to handle than the living. At least they didn't complain. But one night last winter, something happened that still leaves a pit in my stomach whenever I think about it. It was early December, freezing outside, the kind of cold that bites through your coat and lingers in your bones. Most of the hospital had emptied out, except for the emergency ward and the guards. I was wrapping up late, mostly checking inventory and signing logs. The morgue lights buzzed faintly, old tubes that took a second to glow fully. The hum of the cold storage units was the only sound, steady and low, like distant breathing. Before heading out, I did my usual round. I checked the stretchers, the log sheets, and the locked doors. The corridor outside the morgue always felt different at night, like sound didn't travel properly there. Too quiet even for a hospital. That's when I heard it, a scream, sharp, distant, and shrill. It came from the third floor. The third floor had been shut for years. It used to be a pediatric care center, but after some water leakage and maintenance issues, it was closed off. Nobody went there except maintenance staff, and even they avoided it after dark, so hearing a scream from up there didn't make sense. For a moment, I thought it must have come from outside, maybe someone in the emergency ward, but it sounded too close, too contained, like someone was screaming inside a sealed room. I grabbed my ID card, more out of habit than courage, and started walking toward the stairs. The lights in the corridor flickered as I passed, one after the other, in a strange, synchronized pattern. Halfway there, I stumbled on something hard and fell forward. My clipboard clattered. When I turned back to see what I'd tripped over, my throat went dry. A hand was sticking out of the floor. It looked pale, wrinkled, the nails bluish like someone who drowned. It wasn't moving, but it looked real. Not like a trick of the light or a broken mannequin. Just as I blinked, it was gone. The floor was clean, perfectly flat. I ran my hand over the spot. It was cold and polished. There was nothing I could have tripped on. I stood up, brushed the dust off, and told myself it had to be exhaustion. Long hours, low sleep. Maybe my brain was just showing me things. I forced myself to keep walking to the third floor. The stairs creaked faintly. The air felt colder with every step. When I reached the third floor, I noticed something strange. The corridor was pitch dark except for a faint light leaking from under one door, the sensory deprivation room. Only our hospital had one of those. It was meant for patients with extreme mental breakdowns, a soundproof chamber with a saltwater tank that blocked out all external senses. I'd seen it once when it was operational. They said people floated in it, alone with their thoughts. It had been sealed for months, but now the door was slightly open. The smell hit me first, stale water, rust, and something faintly sweet, like old antiseptic mixed with mold. I pushed the door gently. It groaned open. The lights inside flickered weakly before turning on. The room looked abandoned. Peeling paint, dusty floors, but the tank in the center wasn't dry like I expected. It had water, and not still water. There were ripples on the surface, small circular waves, as if someone had just gotten out. My breath felt shallow. I stepped closer, trying to convince myself that maybe maintenance workers had cleaned it. The air was thick and damp, and I could hear a faint dripping somewhere behind me. The ripples grew stronger even though I hadn't moved. And then something pushed me. It wasn't hard, just firm enough to throw me forward. I fell straight into the tank. The water was freezing, thicker than normal, almost oily. I tried to push myself up, but it felt like something was pressing down on my shoulders. Hard. I kicked, flailed, gasped. But every time I tried to rise, invisible hands forced me down. My chest burned. I could feel the weight of something above me, heavier than water. My fingers brushed against what felt like strands of hair floating around me. And then, nothing. I woke up in my cabin, on the floor. My body ached as if I'd fallen from a height. For a few seconds, I thought I'd imagined everything. But when I stood up, I saw my reflection in the glass cabinet. My hair was wet, and my clothes were damp. Soaked, actually. The smell of salt water clung to me. I rushed back to the third floor, heart pounding, but the door to the sensory room was locked. The lock was sealed, the same way it had always been. The corridor was dusty, untouched. No footprints, no sign of anyone. I didn't sleep that night. I kept checking the damp patches on my sleeves, trying to convince myself that maybe I'd spilled something earlier, or maybe I'd fallen asleep and dreamt it all. But the salt smell wouldn't go away. The next morning, I casually asked my colleague about the deprivation tank, if anyone had used it. She told me, almost bored, that the tank hadn't had water in it for 3 months, not even for cleaning. Nobody had keys except for a couple administrators. Sometimes when I stay late, I hear faint splashes from the drain near the morgue corridor. Soft and rhythmic, like someone moving in water. Days later, I tried explaining it all to myself. Stress, sleep deprivation, maybe even a mild seizure or anxiety attack. Maybe it was just bad plumbing or the scream was from outside. And maybe the fall was from my own clumsiness. Maybe my mind filled in the blanks. But every time the lights flicker and I catch a glimpse of a wet footprint on the floor, leading nowhere, I stop pretending that I know what's real and I walk faster. Story number 5. I work the night shift at a small crematory on the outskirts of town. It's not the kind of job people talk about proudly, but it pays. And after a few months, you stop flinching at the smells and the quiet. Nights are mostly routine. Cleaning trays, checking temperature logs, and making sure the burners don't clog with ash. It's dull, heavy work. Or at least it was. 2 weeks ago, I was sweeping behind Furnace 3, the oldest one we still use. The corner behind it had a thick layer of dust. My broom hit something solid, a book wedged between the wall and the furnace's metal frame. It was a small leather-bound ledger, warped from heat and age, its pages yellow and sticking together. The handwriting inside was slanted and neat, written in fountain pen ink that had bled with time. Each line had a name and a cremation date from the 1970s. A few pages in, I noticed something odd. No staff initials, no details, just names and dates, one after another. I left it on the counter and finished my shift. But that night, I dreamt of those names. I didn't see anything in the dream, not clearly, but I heard them. Flat, emotionless voices reciting the same names I'd read earlier. The sound came from everywhere, like whispers pressed right against my ears. I woke up choking, the air thick and metallic, like the sting that fills your nose when the burners flare too hot. The next day I brushed it off. Maybe I'd inhaled too much ash dust. But when I checked the ledger again, there was new writing. The last page had my handwriting, at least it looked like mine, scribbled faintly in pencil, names and dates all from the coming week. One name stood out because it was familiar. It belonged to a man whose cremation was scheduled the next day. I thought maybe I'd written it absent-mindedly, copying from the work log. That night, the same thing happened. More whispers, more names. But this time, I could see flashes between the darkness, shapes moving behind a haze of smoke. People-shaped, but too still. When I woke up, the taste of burnt paper clung to my tongue, and the sheets smelled faintly of smoke. Over the next few days, it got worse. Every night I'd dream, and every morning there'd be new entries in the ledger, written in my shaky handwriting. I started locking the book in the supply cabinet, but it didn't matter. The writing kept appearing. It wasn't just the dreams either. Small things began to change in the crematory. Furnace 3 started clicking when it wasn't running, like metal expanding in the heat, except it happened when everything was cold. The temperature gauge would dip and then spike suddenly, but the room stayed the same. Once, when I passed by, the sight glass fogged up from the inside, like someone had just exhaled against it. One night, I woke up with my throat raw, coughing hard enough to bring up a little blood. The air in my room smelled of burnt hair and something sweet and rancid underneath it. I checked the mirror, and there was ash under my fingernails, smeared gray along my cheek. I live alone. I don't smoke. By then, I'd stopped sleeping properly. I'd sit awake till dawn, trying to convince myself I was imagining it. I even brought the ledger to work one night, thinking maybe it was some old chemical residue from the crematory that was making me hallucinate. But when I set it on the steel counter, the metal hissed faintly, like something wet had touched it. The air near it seemed warmer, like it gave off its own heat. I opened it again. The newest entries had a pattern. They weren't random names anymore. Each one matched someone scheduled for cremation that week, and always one extra name added at the end. A name not on any register. One night, the last name was mine. I told myself it was just a nightmare bleeding into reality. I'd been running on no sleep, working near fumes and heat for too long. Maybe my brain was playing tricks. I left the book at work and went home early. I couldn't stand the thought of being near it. That night I dreamt again. The voices didn't whisper this time. They breathed. Long, shallow breaths right against my ear. The smoke in the dream didn't sting. It filled me, like my lungs were made of it. In the haze, I saw figures standing shoulder to shoulder, faces gray and hollow. Every one of them had ash pouring from their eyes like tears. Their mouths moved in sync, murmuring names until they reached mine. Then silence. When I woke, my room was freezing, even though it was a warm night. The faint smell of burning cloth hung in the air. I checked my phone. It was 3:12 a.m. My throat ached again, and when I turned on the light, there was soot smudged across my pillow. I called in sick the next day, but the crematory supervisor told me he'd already seen me that morning. He said I'd come in early, signed the logbook, and left after 20 minutes. I checked my keys and found the work key was missing from the ring. I still don't remember leaving the house. When I finally went back to work that night, the ledger was gone from where I'd left it. Furnace 3 was burning, even though no cremations were scheduled. The control panel showed the temperature rising past safe limits. I shut it down manually, but when the burner stopped, I swear I heard a faint echo from inside, like voices trapped behind metal. I waited until the chamber cooled enough to open. Inside there was nothing, just a fine layer of gray powder spread evenly across the tray, smooth like untouched sand. Except near the corner, where the powder curved into faint letters, like something had been pressed into it from underneath. It looked like my name, written half-formed before the surface settled again. I never told anyone about that. I left the job a few days later, said the fumes were messing with my lungs. Maybe they were. Maybe that's all it was. Sleep deprivation, stress, chemicals in the air. That's what I keep telling myself. But sometimes when I wake up too suddenly in the middle of the night, I can still smell that faint trace of burnt air clinging to the pillow. And every so often, just before sleep, I hear the low, even sound of someone turning a page, slow and dry, like ash crumbling under paper. I haven't seen the ledger since, but once when I passed the crematory gates on my way to the bus stop, I caught a glimpse of someone through the window, standing by Furnace 3, head bent like they were reading something. I don't know who they were. The next morning I woke up coughing again, and on my bedside table, there was a thin line of ash, drawn like someone had traced a date with their fingertip. The date was tomorrow. Story number 6. I'm not saying what happened to me can't be explained, but ever since that night, things have felt off in a way I really can't shake. It was raining so hard that night, It felt like the world was trying to rinse itself clean. I remember squinting through my windshield, wipers smearing more than clearing, and the clock flashing 2:47 a.m. My phone had no signal, and the GPS kept reloading the same frozen map. I was just 20 minutes from home when my car sputtered, jerked once, and died. The road was empty, no houses, no passing vehicles, just endless fields swallowed by the rain. I stepped out, and the cold hit like needles. My shoes sank slightly into the muddy shoulder, and my headlights barely reached 10 feet ahead before vanishing into sheets of water. That's when I noticed it. A small building across the road. A faded board hung above it, swinging gently. The light from my phone caught the lettering, Marrow and Sons Funeral Home. I stood there for a minute, half expecting lightning to make it disappear like some trick of the rain, but it was there, real, solid, and dimly lit from inside. I figured I could at least wait out the storm. The door gave a long creak as I turned the knob. It wasn't locked. The air inside was stale, thick with disinfectant and something faintly sweet, like wilting flowers. The place was small, 2 benches, a few old photographs on the wall, and at the center, a coffin with a glass viewing panel. A dim yellow bulb flickered above the prayer area, throwing uneven shadows. Through the glass, I could see the face of an old man, pale, waxy, unnaturally smooth. His eyes were shut, but his mouth had that faint upward curl that made it look like he was mid-smirk. There was a tag at his wrist, probably for tomorrow's burial. I wasn't scared then, just uncomfortable. I sat on one of the benches, scrolling through my phone to find any bit of signal. When it finally caught a faint bar, I called my friend, mostly to kill time. I even joked about being stuck in a funeral home with a corpse, saying if anything haunted me tonight, it better help fix my car. We laughed about it. But later, when I thought back, I realized that's probably when things started feeling off. At some point during the call, I started hearing tiny noises. Not clear, just faint shuffling sounds from deeper inside the room. It could have been rainwater dripping from the roof, or maybe wood expanding, but the bulb above the coffin flickered twice, and I swear it wasn't my imagination. The old man's lips looked just a little more closed than before. I blinked hard and told myself it was just the shadows. By 4 a.m., the rain had eased to a drizzle. I decided to leave. When I reached the entrance and tried pushing the door, it wouldn't move. I tried again, harder this time. It didn't even rattle. It was like it had been locked from outside. I felt my stomach twist. I turned around slowly, and that's when I saw it, the reflection on the glass door. Someone was standing behind me, not near, not beside, but right behind me. The outline was unmistakable. The sagged suit, the pale collar, the slightly tilted head. My first thought was that someone else had walked in, but when I spun around, there was nothing. The coffin was still there, the lid half shadowed by the weak bulb. My ears felt like they were filling with pressure. The smell in the room had changed too. It wasn't flowers anymore. It was damp, metallic, and faintly sour. Then came the sound, a soft metallic click from behind me, like a key turning in a lock. The door handle moved slightly on its own. I didn't think. I just grabbed it, yanked it open, and bolted into the rain. My car, which had refused to start earlier, roared to life the second I turned the key. I didn't stop until I was back home, drenched and shaking. For the next few days, I tried convincing myself I'd just freaked out because of the storm and exhaustion. But 3 nights later, something strange happened. When I entered my kitchen, there was a stench, thick and rotten like old meat. I checked everywhere, thinking maybe some food had gone bad. Under the sink, behind the fridge, nothing. Then near the back door, I saw it. A dead bird, or what was left of it. Its head was half decayed, feathers clumped together, maggots wriggling out. I don't know how it got there. My kitchen windows were closed. I wrapped it in a newspaper and threw it out. Told myself maybe a cat dragged it in. 2 days later, I woke up to the same smell again. This time, it was in my bedroom. Something wet was on the floor near the dresser. A small clump of hair sticking together in a dark puddle. It didn't look like animal fur. It looked human. I remember staring at it, unable to move. The mirror beside it was fogged up. like someone had breathed on it from too close. I could still see the faint condensation spreading downward. I started sleeping with the lights on after that. My apartment felt colder every night, and the air seemed to carry this faint floral scent, the same one from that funeral home. I even checked my shoes one morning before leaving for work and found bits of soil stuck to the soles. Dark, wet soil, like the kind you'd find near graves. I told myself maybe I'd stepped in something near a construction site. I cleaned the floors, washed my clothes, but the smell stayed. The final thing that broke me happened a week later. I woke up around 3:30 a.m., thirsty. The house was silent. When I opened the fridge for water, the bulb inside flickered, and for a second, I saw a face reflected in the metal door of the fridge, white, sagged, and smiling faintly. I turned and there was nothing, but when I looked back, there was a small print on the stainless steel, like someone had pressed a wet hand against it. I wiped it clean, sat on the floor, and stayed there until sunrise. Since then, strange things just happen around me. The light above my prayer shelf sometimes flickers in a steady rhythm. 2 short flashes, 1 long, the same pattern from that bulb above the coffin. I moved apartments last month thinking it'd stop, but sometimes at night, when the power cuts off, I catch a faint reflection in my TV screen. A shadow behind me that disappears the second I move. I keep telling myself it's stress, maybe hallucinations, maybe the smell I notice is from some old pipes or damp wood. But even now, as I write this, the room feels oddly cold, and I can't shake the feeling that if I turn around too quickly, I'll see that faint smile again. Maybe it's all in my head, or maybe that night, something walked out of that coffin before I did, and it's been following me ever since. Story number 7. I was 17 when my friends decided to end a boring Friday with the dumbest idea ever, drinking behind the churchyard and sneaking into the cemetery next to it. Small town fun, you could say. I didn't even want to go, but peer pressure works best when you're 3 beers in. By midnight, we were laughing over gravestones, throwing dares, and pretending we weren't terrified. The place was old, quiet, and the air smelled of wet soil and iron. Every now and then, twigs snapped somewhere in the dark. It was probably rats or birds, but it had that kind of silence that made every sound feel deliberate. Around 2 a.m., I wandered off to pee behind a broken wall near the far corner. That's when I saw her. She was standing still, too still, at the edge of the boundary wall, her long hair barely moving in the wind. I called out, thinking maybe one of the girls had wandered off, but the figure didn't react. Then without any movement I could catch, she was gone, just slipped behind a tree like melting into the dark. I brushed it off, blamed the alcohol, and rejoined the group. We stayed till dawn. Nothing major happened, just that vague dread of being somewhere you shouldn't. I went home, showered, slept like the dead. The next afternoon, while nursing my hangover at a cafe, this girl walked up to me. I swear I'd never seen anyone like her. Skin pale and clean like porcelain, eyes that didn't blink enough, and this faint, earthy smell that I couldn't place. She said I looked familiar. We started talking, and somehow we clicked. Over the next few weeks, we began dating. She never mentioned her family, said she was new in town, renting a small flat nearby. Everything about her was perfect in a way that felt slightly off, like she'd been practiced into existence. That's when things started getting weird. At night, I'd sometimes wake up to find her missing from bed. The bathroom light would be off, and the apartment door locked from inside. I'd check every corner. Nothing. Then I'd come back, and she'd be lying there again, smiling like she'd never moved. Once I tried confronting her about it, and she said I must have been dreaming. She laughed, and I let it go because the way she said it, it didn't sound like a lie. It sounded like she knew something I didn't. One morning while making coffee, I noticed her fingernails. The tips were caked with dirt, the kind you get only when you've dug into something damp. She wasn't a gardener. She barely even liked plants. I asked, and she just looked at her hands like she didn't see what I was talking about. The dirt was gone the next second, wiped clean somehow, though I didn't see her wash them. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night with that same smell thick in my throat and a faint sound like someone dragging fingers across wood. I convinced myself it was stress, or maybe the booze catching up, but the unease never really left. A few nights later, I woke up around 3 a.m. She wasn't beside me again. The air in the room felt heavier than usual, like the oxygen was thinner. I got up, checked the bathroom. It was empty. I checked the door, still bolted. Every shadow looked too solid. I turned back toward the bed and froze. She was sitting there facing me, her grin wide enough to show her gums, eyes half-lidded like she was pretending to sleep but watching at the same time. She said she'd been in the washroom. Her voice sounded wrong, like the sound came from somewhere deeper than her throat. I remember nodding, too scared to say anything. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning she was normal again, cheerful, like nothing had happened. But I couldn't unsee that grin. It had been too wide, too real. Then one day everything stopped making sense. I woke up late, made coffee, opened the newspaper, and nearly dropped the cup. There she was, her picture, right there, on the front page. It said she'd died 3 weeks ago, in a car crash, the exact day I'd gone to that cemetery. I must have read it 100 times. My brain refused to connect the words. Dead, accident, identified. I called her phone over and over. No answer. The apartment was silent, but her things were still there. Her scarf on the chair, toothbrush in the holder, her favorite mug drying on the sink. I went to the cemetery. I don't even know why. Maybe I thought someone would tell me it was all a mistake. When I reached her grave, I felt my legs shake. Her name, her picture, the same one from the paper. The caretaker there was an old man. He told me she'd been buried the day after the crash. Said her body had been found not far from the churchyard. I asked if she'd been alone, and he nodded. Said her car hit a tree. He mentioned something strange though. When they buried her, her hands looked like she'd been clawing at something. The dirt under her nails was dark and packed tight. I remember feeling sick, like my insides were shrinking. I stumbled back to my apartment that night, half expecting her to be there, half hoping she wasn't. The lights flickered when I opened the door. Everything looked untouched. Her mug was still there, her scarf, the bed. Then I noticed the floor. Muddy footprints, bare ones, trailing from the door to the bedroom. My shoes were clean. I followed them to the bed. The sheets were slightly raised like someone was lying beneath. My throat locked up. I didn't lift the blanket. I couldn't. I just backed out, shut the door, and left the apartment. I never went back. It's been years since then. Sometimes I dream of her, standing by that cemetery wall, half hidden behind the tree, just watching. The same faint grin, the same stillness. People tell me it was all guilt and imagination, that I was drunk that night, and my mind created someone out of memory and madness. Maybe they're right. Maybe she never existed. But there's one thing that still bothers me. A few months after I moved out, I got a call from the new tenant of my old apartment. She said she'd found something buried under the wooden floor near the bed. A ring, my ring, the one I'd given her. And sometimes, late at night, she hears footsteps, bare ones, walking across the floor, stopping right where the bed used to be.